Hi everyone, my name is Brenna and I'm an educator at the Cold Spring Harbor Whaling Museum. Thanks for joining us for Vikings and Unicorns. Today, we are going to discover how the whaling and seafaring Vikings tricked an entire continent into believing in unicorn legends. We're also going to explore the history of these ferocious mariners and create Viking-inspired crafts together. Are you guys ready? Great, let's get started. So first off, we have to ask ourselves a question, right? Who were the Vikings? Have you guys ever heard of that word before, Vikings? Maybe. They were a group of fearsome navigators who sailed the seas over 1,000 years ago. They came from an area of Northern Europe called Scandinavia. This is the area that has countries like Finland, Norway, Denmark, and Sweden today. But the Vikings, they were people that explored lands all around the world, including areas here in North America. Vikings are kind of like pirates, all right? They were really good at attacking various settlements of people across Europe. They liked to steal gold and food and other goods to take back home with them. For that reason, Vikings were really feared by many of the people across Europe and even in Northern Africa, because it was believed that they would come and attack their villages. But not all Vikings did this. Some of them wanted to set up new places to fish and spend the winter. So sometimes Vikings weren't there to attack, but to settle instead. The reason that Vikings were so good at traveling all over the world was because they were master seafarers. Vikings used these special boats called longships. Here's a great image of one here. These longships allowed them to explore in all kinds of different environments. Longships were specially designed to be very shallow, which made them not only fast, but also meant that they could be sailed up very, very shallow rivers, and even on the open ocean as well. These ships were light. They weren't heavy, they were shallow and light, which meant that if Vikings needed to travel from the ocean to a river, or even to another river or body of water further inland, they could carry these ships out of the water, place them on logs, and roll them across the land until they got to another body of water where they could use them. So these guys were pretty scary. You think if you've got these people who are coming to maybe attack your village, you're not even safe if you're further inland in like a forest, because they can roll their ships over the land to get to you. Very, very good at what they did. Here's another image of a Viking ship in a very, very cold area. One of the other good things about long ships is because they were so shallow and light, they were really easy to turn and navigate, which meant that Vikings could sail much more far north than many other people, because there's so much ice in Arctic waters. It's really dangerous for a big ship that's slow and kind of clumsy to be, because they can easily get hit by an iceberg. But Viking ships, you can turn them easily, and you can navigate around all of that ice. So they were really able to go in places that other ships weren't able to go at the same period of time. Because of this, Vikings became legendary explorers. They traveled much farther than most people did, and they were really well known as people who would travel to places that no other people had seen before. In the year 1000, a group of Vikings led by a man called Leif Erikson established a winter fishing colony in northern Canada, almost 500 years before Christopher Columbus sailed across the Atlantic. Vikings also sailed to Iceland, Britain, and all other islands around Europe, as well as up rivers in Russia, and even into the Black Sea and the Middle East. So we've got this great map here, which not only shows you where Vikings come from, their area is in blue right here, but you can also see all of the places in orange that they traveled to. One place, Iceland here, is an island entirely in orange, and that's because nobody else had lived in Iceland before Vikings had came. So everybody who was living in Iceland at that period of time was a Viking or descended from Vikings. Other places that they traveled are Greenland, the big icy body of land here. You can see that they made their way over into Canada, like we mentioned before. They went to Europe, to England and Ireland, also France here, parts of Russia, You can see how far inland and away from the ocean they get. That's because, again, they're able to carry these big ships over land and go up really, really tiny little rivers. So they were great at traveling all around. Now, the reason that we know that they were so good at traveling all around is a couple of things. One thing is that they were really good storytellers. We know Vikings traveled, and then we know something about their travels, including the fact that they hunted whales, from some of the stories that they told. Vikings told these grand tales of their adventures called sagas, which is a word you may have heard of before. The Vikings, they carved these sagas, these legends and stories about their travels, into giant, giant rocks that they found in all of the places that they went to. These large rocks are called rune stones, and they erected them anywhere that they traveled to. The word rune refers to the writing that Vikings created. So if you see on this giant rock here, there are different pictures, there are images of animals, there are some different shapes, but there's also a ribbon with little tiny marks that almost look like letters inside. Those marks are runes. Vikings used a different alphabet than we do today, and this was their way of writing down language. So once you are able to decode that language, once you know the meaning of each rune, you're able to read the stories that they wrote about their journeys. They also sometimes, in addition to creating stories on stones that they found, they sometimes used stones and other structures that they found on those journeys, not just stones in the ground, but sculptures that were already created to write down their stories, kind of like graffiti. Let me show you an example. This is a drawing of a sculpture called the Piraeus Lion, which was a statue in Athens in Greece. And the Vikings, they made their way to Greece, and while they were conquering Athens, they decided that they wanted to write down stories of their adventures. But they couldn't find any giant stones like the ones you saw before. So what they did instead was they found a lovely sculpture of a lion, and they carved their story into that sculpture. So if you can see on the lion's body, it's really faint, but there's sort of a sneaking thread, ribbon, that has those runes in it. The inscription itself is pretty long because they talk about all of their journeys, but one little part of it reads, Asmund cut these runes with Asgeir and Thorleif, Thord and Ivar, those are all of the Vikings, at the request of Harold the Tall, who was probably their leader, though the Greeks considered about it and forbade it. This basically means that all of these guys, Asmund, Asgeir, Thorleif, Thord and Ivar, they carved graffiti into this lion, and the Greeks who were there, they were mad about it. They didn't want their beautiful statue to be carved with graffiti, but the Vikings did it anyway. One other way that we know that the Vikings were wonderful navigators and traveled all around the world, and especially that they hunted whales, is from some of the items that they left behind. We call these items artifacts. These are objects made by people long ago that have been discovered today. Archaeologists have found several Viking artifacts made of walrus tusks and whale teeth and other items from Arctic sea creatures. Vikings used these materials to make flutes and pipes and spears and knives and even game pieces. So this image that we see here, this is actually a whalebone grave marker, so kind of like a gravestone, but it's carved out of whalebone. So the fact that this exists and was carved by Vikings helps us today know that Vikings came across whales and probably hunted them because they got their bones. We know other things about the animals that they hunted from other artifacts. So this image here is of a group of artifacts known as the Lewis chessmen. Remember I said that they sometimes made game pieces out of these animals? Well, they made chess pieces out of some walrus tusks. These guys here may look familiar to you if you've ever seen the Harry Potter films. The wizard's chess pieces in those movies are based on these chess pieces carved by Vikings. These particular figures right here, these are the knights if you play chess. Does anybody play chess? It's a good game. These are the knights. They were called berserkers because they were so crazy with battle lust. that they had to bite their shields. You see their teeth there? They had to bite their shields to keep themselves sort of under control, which I think is great. So in addition to whales and walruses, we know that one of the creatures that the Vikings came across and hunted were narwhals. Narwhals, if you don't know, they are small Arctic whales known best for the spiraling tooth or tusk that grows out of the front of their faces. These whales live in really, really cold waters all the way up in the Arctic and weren't usually come across by other people because other people, remember, didn't have ships that allowed them to travel in really icy waters. Whereas the Vikings had those great long ships, so they could travel into cold waters and come across creatures like narwhals. Now, it seems like what happened was that Vikings, they hunted these creatures and they realized that they could sell their tusks, those beautiful, beautiful teeth, and pass them off as unicorn horns. Now, people all across Europe knew about unicorns back then. They were obsessed with unicorns. Unicorns were thought to be these mythical creatures that had these special horns that would help you stay protected from poison. Sometimes the unicorn itself, its blood had healing powers. And Europeans were really, really eager to find proof that unicorns existed. Well, Vikings knew that they had come across these whales and that no one else in Europe had really seen them. So they knew that they could sell the whales' tusks and pretend that they were unicorn horns. Because Vikings sold the tusks and said that they were unicorn horns, everybody in Europe changed the way that they thought about unicorns. Remember, people hadn't seen unicorns before. So before they saw these tusks, they kind of were worried about unicorns. They were a little bit afraid of these ferocious creatures that had all of these magical powers. When they used to draw unicorns, Europeans would draw these monsters that are sort of scary looking, like this guy here. But little by little, as they started to see these beautiful tusks that the Vikings were selling, they reimagined unicorns as graceful creatures, as more delicate creatures. You can see that this figure here is a unicorn with that spiraling horn. The rest of it looks kind of like a leopard, but it's supposed to be a unicorn. And little by little, this guy's got a spiral horn too. People start to imagine unicorns that look more like the unicorns that we're familiar with today. You can see in this picture, you've got a unicorn there, but that people also understood at this point in time, this is a little bit later, this was done in the 1700s, people understood that there was also an animal that lived in the ocean that had a similar tusk, just like unicorns. So the idea of unicorns is one of the things that Vikings have left behind, but there are a lot of other things that you may be familiar with that are because of the Vikings. So when I said sagas, you may not know any Viking sagas off the top of your head, but I bet you know some of the characters. Anybody heard of this guy, Thor? Well, the theft of Thor's hammer is one of the most famous Viking sagas. Thor was a Viking god, and he was talked about a lot. Anybody familiar with Lord of the Rings? Well, that entire series of books was based on a Viking saga called The Curse of Andvari's Ring, which is, again, something that you may not have known, but I bet you've heard of Lord of the Rings. I bet you even speak a couple of words of Viking. Yeah? Anybody ever heard of the words like awkward, egg, freckle, or knife? Yeah, well, believe it or not, those are all Viking words. So the next time you talk about freckles or knives, you're speaking a little bit of Viking. Even the days of the week have some traces of Viking in them. The words Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday all have to do with Viking gods. Wednesday was named after Odin, Woden. You may have heard of him if you're a Thor fan. Thursday is named after Thor himself, Thursday, Thor's Day. And Friday was named after Frigg, an important Viking goddess. So now that we've talked all about these seafarers and the unicorns that they inspired, we're going to make ourselves a wonderful Viking helmet. Have you guys ever seen these guys, Vikings with their horned helmets? Well, that's what we're going to make today. But first, hold on. We have to be very clear that actually, even though people draw Vikings with these horned helmets, that's just a myth. The Viking helmets that archaeologists have found don't have horns at all. The idea of Vikings wearing horned helmets was actually invented in the German opera in the 1800s, where costume designers decided to put Vikings in horned helmets. But that's not really real. We're still going to make one though, because horned helmets are fun to have. So to make this craft with me, you're going to need a certain amount of materials. You're going to need paper, scissors, glue or tape, markers or crayons, and if you have them, it's great to use glitter or sequins or stickers, but those are not necessary. The first step of this craft is to take a piece of paper and fold it into 3 lengthwise. You're going to want to cut it. I'm folding it just to make sure that I've got the same width for all my paper, but you're going to want to cut it into 3. So you can see on the paper on the screen, I've drawn lines and then cut them out. These pieces of paper, they're going to be the band for your Viking helmet. So you're going to cut them out as evenly as possible, although it doesn't really matter if they're a little bit uneven. And then the next step is to decorate. And you can decorate these guys however you want. So we've got an example here. Vikings like to use these big swirling designs. Sometimes they did animals, sometimes they did places that they've come across. Sometimes they just did pretty patterns, which is what I'm going to draw. But you can draw whatever you want. Remembering that these pieces of paper that you're drawing on, these 3 pieces of paper, they're going to be the headband that goes around the Viking helmet base. It's going to go around your head. So you can spend as much or as little time decorating them as you want to. Once you're done, we're going to move on to step 3, which is to make the horns, the historically inaccurate horns. Now, if you have cardstock or construction paper or heavy paper, this is a great time to use it. If you don't, what you can also do is just double up a piece of paper. So you can take one piece of paper, fold it in half, like I've done on the screen, and then use tape or glue to stick it together to create an extra strong piece of paper. Okay, and that's just going to make sure that your horns stand up, because you don't want droopy horns. There's nothing less scary than a Viking with droopy horns. So the more those horns stand up, the better. I'm just going to quickly glue this piece of paper, and then there it is, my extra strong piece of paper glued together. Once you've done that, we have to draw the horns on. This is best to do if you've got a pencil, just so you can erase if you make a mistake. The horn shape should look kind of like a banana, but you can make whatever kind of horn you want to. I'm just going to show you a quick horn shape that I've got there. Just very simple draw. You can make it as pointy as you want. You can make it a totally different kind of horn if you want. You can make a spiral horn, just any kind of horn. And then once you've done that, you want to cut it out. So cut it out. You can have an adult help you if you want. And then once you've cut it out, you've got a horn. You want to do the same thing with another piece of paper. So glue another piece of paper together again, make it extra strong, draw a horn, and cut it out. And there are our 2 horns together. So once you've got 2 lovely Viking horns, the next step is to glue or tape the headband pieces together to form a ring. Remember, you want it to fit around your head. So if you've got glue, that's fine. If you've got tape, that's fine. You want to take a couple pieces, tape them together, and then have somebody else help you measure your head. Now you can see I need 3 pieces of paper, because 2 pieces of paper is just a little bit too short. You may find that 2 pieces of paper is fine for your head, and that's okay. Once you've done that and gotten it into a ring, just make sure you tape it all together so that it fits snugly around your head, and you're good to go. Got it. I'm trying to do it myself, you can see. It is easier with somebody else to help you out. All right. So once you've got your ring, it's time to add your horns, right? You're going to add your horns on the side of your helmet headband. But to do that, we need to first bend your horns. There's the headband all together. Now it's time to add the horns. So what you're going to do is you're going to fold back a small, like half-inch section of each of the horns, right? So you can see the picture there. I did one and then the other. You want to fold these back because this little piece here, that's the piece that you're going to tape to your helmet so that it stands up, right? So once you folded it back, you're going to take a little piece of tape and put it on your helmet. It's best to do this not while you're wearing your helmet. So I'm going to take it off and show you. So again, this is the little piece that I folded back here. That's the piece that's going to go flat against my helmet. And I'm going to tape it on like that so that it stands upright. And you just do the same thing with your other horn. You've got a Viking helmet that you can wear around your neighborhood. You can wear it on grand adventures just like the Vikings went on. And I hope you enjoy it. So that brings us to the end of our program. I'd like to thank you guys so much for watching us today. It was so much fun to give this program to you. If you are looking for other things to do, you can always check out our website, cshwhalingmuseum.org, for other ideas. You can also check with your library because I'm sure that they have other wonderful programs available for you. So once again, my name is Brenna. Thank you so much for joining us today, and I hope you guys have a great rest of your day. Bye.